Well, hello, Nativity Bible Heads. It is Dr. Wayne, and it is time for a Sunday morning Power Bible Study for the 4th of July. Today's texts come from the cycle of Year B, Proper 9. I'm not going to go into what the propers are all about, but just shortly though, the propers are those Sundays that occur in both Epiphany Tide and after Pentecost. That's all I'm going to say about it. All right, we are in 2 Samuel chapter 5. We have a passage about David and his throne. Psalm 48, which is a nice response to that. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Paul relates a very personal experience, very interesting. And then Mark chapter 6, where Jesus visits his hometown. All right, in 2 Samuel chapter 5, one of the things that we've been tracking in these weeks have been like the major plot line things of the rise of David, and in this passage today we have a time where David makes a movement that unifies things. Let's just get into it, and then I'll get into the weeds later. We're in chapter 5 of 2 Samuel, verses 1 through 5, and then verses 9 through 10. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron. Okay, I got to stop right there because you got to understand what is happening here in Hebron. Where's Hebron? Hebron is a city in Judah, which is the southern kingdom. Remember, when Saul died, yes, David had been anointed to be the next king, but up to now, in chapter 5, he was only king of Judah, okay? The southern, what would become known as the southern kingdom. And he reigned in, his rule was, his seat of power was in the city of Hebron, okay? Now, the last of Saul's the sons died, and there was one who was like on the throne of the northern kingdom for just a little bit. And David here is making a gesture toward unification. Look there, what they say to him. Okay, so when it says all the tribes of Israel, it's not talking about Israel up and down, all 12 of them, all 12 tribes. No, it's just talking about the northern kingdom, what would come to be known as the northern kingdom, okay? He's already king of Judah. Oh, now you get the picture here? What did they say to him? Look, we are your bone and flesh. Okay, that's one way of saying, we really are family, even though we haven't been acting like it, and we've been acting like we're not. Remember, they're all descendants of Jacob, okay, who got renamed Israel, okay. Verse 2. For some time, while Saul was king over us, see, Saul was more favored amongst the northern kingdom, and when Saul was king, David had been a key commander of military forces. Look at this next expression. For some time, while Saul was king over us, it was you who led out Israel and brought it in. This is an expression. To lead them out and bring in. To go out and come in. This is a militaristic language. This is a euphemism for, you were a great military commander under Saul. You brought great success while you were in the military for us. So this is their way of saying, okay, David, yes, we're all descendants of Jacob, and you were very loyal to Saul and did a great job as his commander. Look at this. The Lord said to you, it is you who shall be shepherd of my people Israel, you who shall be ruler over Israel. We are not sure what it is that the if they're quoting. We don't. It's like it seems like they're quoting something, but we don't know where. We don't know what's the source of this, but they are stating a desire that David, it's okay if David is king over not just Judah, but all Israel, okay? So, verse 3, so all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron. Remember, this is the capital of the southern kingdom, Judah, the capital. And King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. Remember, he'd already been anointed king over Judah. He'd been ruling over Judah. This is an act of unification, an act of, okay, we're tired of fighting and being separate. We want unity. Verse 4, David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. At Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And at Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. So 7.5 years in Hebron and 33 years at Jerusalem. We haven't yet been told about Jerusalem. This is the author at this point. We think of Israel as like, oh yeah, that's the capital of all of Israel, blah, 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 blah. And we know that it's going to be because that's where the temple's going to be built. But that hasn't happened yet, okay? Verses 6, 7, and 8 are kind of curious little passages that we don't need. There's too many weeds, okay? You've heard about the expression, don't get into the weeds. There's too many weeds in there. The bottom line is this. David took Jerusalem. Verse 9. David occupied the stronghold and named it the city of David. David built the city all around from the Millo inward. This is a reference to this ancient city that remember, Jerusalem had not been a part of either the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom. Jerusalem was still like an independent enclave, if you will, that neither Saul's during Saul's reign, he never conquered Jerusalem. Jerusalem was conquered by David. David took it. David built the city, and that's where it is today, right? Okay. Notice it says he occupied the stronghold and named it the city of David. David built the city all around from Millo. The Millo is kind of like the terraces. That part. There's a lot of. Jerusalem is built on a bunch of hills. Okay, hills, and then there's valleys, right? Jerusalem is built on all these hills. And there's a lot of terracing where they would build up, I think, to create a flatness area. We think that's what the reference to the Millo is. David built the city all around. And David became greater and greater, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. That's the a summary statement for that. This is the beginning of a grand experiment. Okay, remember, Saul. There hadn't been any king until the people told Samuel, "Hey, we want a king." Samuel says, "No, the Lord doesn't want you to have a king, but we want a king anyway." Okay, well, the Lord's going to give you a king, and then the Lord is sorry that he gave them Saul. And then David. Well, this is an experiment of unity. There never was true unity between the northern tribes and the southern tribes. There never was. David is introducing an experiment in unity that had never been tried before. It continues under Solomon, but then that's it. That's when they split. And if you're with me in our studies of 1st and 2nd Kings, you know that that's the situation in 1st and 2nd Kings, which are the books after 2nd Samuel. Unity was accomplished by David. It was thinly sustained during Solomon, but it fell apart after Solomon. Okay? All right. I'm thinking of using this for my sermon text. I'm not 100% sure yet. But we're going to move on. Psalm 48. Psalm 48. Psalm 48 is a psalm that celebrates Zion. Zion is the name of the hill, of the many hills of Jerusalem. Zion is the name of the hill on which the temple would come to be built. Okay? So let's look at Psalm 48. Psalm 48. The Magnus Dominus. Great is the Lord. By the way, if you've ever noticed that Latin, in our Book of Common Prayer, there's a Latin title for every psalm. And the Latin title is basically just the first couple of words, 3 or 4, sometimes 3 or 4 words in Latin that the psalm starts out. So this is called the Magnus Dominus. Great is the Lord. Magnus Dominus. Great is the Lord. Dominus is the Lord. Magnus, great. Okay. Great is the Lord and highly to be praised. In the city of our God is his holy hill. Beautiful and lofty. The joy of all the earth is the hill of Zion, the very center of the world and the city of the great King. God is in her citadels. He is known to be her sure refuge. Many psalms are celebrations of entering the temple. Sometimes they're called entrance psalms. I don't know, what's the word? Royal psalms. But they're intended to be used as a celebratory chant, if you will, as they enter the temple area. This is that kind of thing. Yes, Jerusalem had not been a part of Israel until David. But it became the center of all Israel. It became a center, a symbolic gesture, meeting, or what? A symbolic centering of those two different parts of, like, kind of like a meeting in the middle kind of a thing. So the traditions around Jerusalem start to get very lofty, hence the words, this very center of the world and the city of the great King. David. God is in her citadels. He is, okay, verse 4. Behold, the kings of the earth assembled and marched forward together. They looked and were astounded. They retreated and fled in terror. Trembling seized them there. They writhed like a woman in childbirth, like ships of the sea when the east wind shatters them. This is an expression. Remember, David fought in many battles. He was one of Saul's big successful commanders. So, yes, they're applauding those kind of victories, okay? Verse 7, as we have heard, so we have seen in the city of the Lord of hosts, in the city of our God, God has established her forever. These are very highfalutin thoughts, folks. Very highfalutin thoughts. We know how important Jerusalem became to Judaism. This is one of the things that Jesus dealt with, and in the mission of the church beyond Jesus, it started to become a problem for the fact that there was too much emphasis on it. Jerusalem is the center of the universe. We should never leave. But Paul's like, no, the future is out there. Yes, this is fine and great and all that, but you know what? The future of the church is not to be sucked in. The future of the church, of what God came to do in Jesus through Judaism, yes, is to get out there. All right. You waited. Verse 8. We have waited in silence on your loving kindness, O God. Oh, on your loving kindness. That's I think that's the word chesed. I didn't look it up, but it usually gets translated that way, chesed, which is solidarity. We have waited in silence on your solidarity, O God, in the midst of your temple. That's what came to be built on Mount Zion, one of the hills of Jerusalem. Your praise, like your name, O God, reaches to the world's end. Your right hand is full of justice. Verse 10. Let Mount Zion be glad and the cities of Judah rejoice because of your judgments. Frequently in the Psalms, you invite or extol the inanimate creation to celebrate with you in what's going on. Verse 11, make the circuit of Zion, walk round about her, count the number of her towers. So they're like, maybe even this is like a chant of a parade. Going around, walk around about her, count the number of. Verse 12, consider well her bulwarks, examine her strongholds, that you may tell those who come after. This God is our God forever and ever. He shall be our guide forevermore. True worship of God doesn't localize God as being in just one place. So even though they are extolling Zion and Jerusalem, the center of but it's all about God. It's not, we don't want to idolize a place. We don't want to idolize a city. We don't want to idolize any kind of man-made structure. This God is our God forever and ever. He shall be our guide forevermore. And if I were to put a footnote to the psalmist here, despite whatever happens to Jerusalem and the Temple Mount and all of that, despite that, because that's basically what Jesus says when he comes later. Okay, we're moving on. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 2 through 10. We're getting toward the end. This might be the last of, it is. This is the last of the, I'm pretty sure, I'm like 99% sure this is the last of the 2 Corinthians passages that we've been reading. We've been reading a lot from this. Paul has to defend his ministry a lot, and he doesn't like to boast. He doesn't want to. But in this chapter 12, he is like, he's like ready to just come out with it. Look at this. I'm going to start in verse 1. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 1. It is necessary to boast. Okay, I don't know if that's actually verse 1 or if that's the end of verse 33. I think it is the beginning of verse 1. It is necessary to boast. All along he's been saying, I don't want to boast. Now he's saying, okay, I gotta boast. Nothing is to be gained by it, but I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. Okay, so he says it is necessary to boast. There's nothing to be gained by it. I'm going to talk about visions and revelations ahead of the Lord, but really what I'm doing here is boasting. Look at this, verse 2. I know a person of Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Okay, Jewish cosmogony here. There's the heaven that we see with the clouds. There's the heavens beyond. There's the second heaven of the stars. And then there's what's called the third heaven. The third heaven is the heaven where it's invisible. It cannot be seen by human eyes, okay? That's the cosmogony that's going on here. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows. And I know that such a person, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows, was caught up into paradise and heard things that are not to be told, that no mortal is permitted to repeat. Paul here is speaking of a personal experience. He's talking of himself in the third person. Remember, he's like, boasting isn't going to bring about anything, but okay, you made me do it. I'm going to have to play this card. And this card is, I had quite an experience 14 years ago. I haven't talked about it. I don't know if it was an in-the-body experience or out of the body. I don't know what was really happening to me. I don't know, maybe he just had some mushrooms. I don't know. But here he is saying he was caught up to paradise. Paradise is that realm of the third heaven, the dwelling of God, where we cannot see, okay, the invisible realm of God, okay? Paul is saying he was caught up into it. And he heard things that were not to be told. It's like, it's like he's telling them, okay, I've been told things that I can't tell you. You wouldn't receive it well, but this seems to be what's going on. That no mortal is permitted to repeat. And he's not going to repeat them here. But he is going to talk about an experience that he had in this thing here. Look at this. On behalf of such a one, I will boast. He's repeating himself. But on my own behalf, I will not boast, except of my weakness. This is where he's going to go with it. Even though I feel very special because of this experience I had. But that's not what I got out of the entire experience. He's going to talk a bit about his weaknesses here. Look at this. But if I wish to boast, I will not be a fool, for I will be speaking the truth. But I refrain from it, so that no one may think better of me than what is seen in me or heard from me. Even considering the exceptional character of the revelations. Oh my goodness. Therefore, to keep me from being too elated, okay, Paul is saying that God knew that I could get a big head out of this experience. God knew this. God knew that my mortal nature would be that this would go to my head. You've heard people say, oh, don't tell them I'll just go to their head. Well, Paul is saying, well, God knew this about me. So what did he do? He decided to give me something to deal with. Look at this. Therefore, to keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given me in the flesh. This is a metaphor. Look at this. A messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. Oh my goodness. 3 times I appealed to the Lord, this is verse 8, about this, that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Oh my goodness. There's so much here. Maybe I'll preach on this. I don't know. Thorn in the flesh. Messenger of Satan tormenting him. Why? To keep him humble. Okay. I tell you what. Commentators have had a field day speculating what is the thorn in the flesh of Paul. What is the thorn in the flesh? What's the thorn in the flesh he's dealing with here? Some misogynistic interpretations of Paul will say, well, this clearly indicates that he was married. Yeah, and he had a nagging wife. This is what people will say. It's like, and this plays well in some crowds, because some crowds, a guy could say like, oh yeah, ooh, been there, lived there, just described my life right there. Well, I tell you what, it can mean many things. I don't know that that's necessarily it. My dad actually, in his trying to dissuade me from marrying, said, that thorn in the flesh, Apostle Paul, could have been a wife. Some people think that it might refer to a physical ailment, that it might refer to a speech impediment. Some people think it might refer to a sight disorder. Some people think that it could refer to the fact that maybe he'd suffered something of like an aneurysm or something, where it made things difficult, like a stroke or something like that, where parts of his body that, cause remember how sometimes he's like, says, look at what big letters I write with. Maybe he's had some residue of an epileptic condition, seizures, and then there are people who consider, well, maybe this means Paul. This is what Paul's way of saying that he was gay. I don't know. Maybe. But you don't have to be gay to be to let your, shall we say, our libido, we want what we want, and when we want it, that knows no sexuality. Hello, hetero, homo, whatever, it doesn't matter. So, we don't know what the thorn in the flesh was, but whatever it was consistent, and it kept him humble, and he's saying this is what he saw it as the Lord's work. Remember, oh gosh, maybe this could be a good sermon. Remember when Job was at the beginning of the book of Job, Satan basically had to get God's permission to go after Job. Is it possible that this is what happened with Paul? Because Paul refers to this thorn in the flesh as a messenger of Satan that tormented him. I don't know. But what we do know is that for Paul, this resulted in him boasting all the more gladly of his weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Whatever it was, it made him feel much more dependent on Christ. He felt less independent. He felt less self-sustaining. He felt less arrogant. It was like a little bit of a blow against his arrogance. And who couldn't use that? I could use that. I think that's one of my problems sometimes. I've got a little bit of that going on. True that. Boasting of your weaknesses so that the power of Christ may dwell. This is what made Paul usable to God, is that he was that, okay? Therefore, I'm going to, verse 10, therefore, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities, everything which, by the way, I've experienced in my ministries, for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong. For Paul, he experienced the power of God, much more so when he was present to his failures and his insufficiencies. That's the only way, oh my goodness, that's the only way we can ever truly experience God's power. Yes, it's nice to see the blessings. It's like sometimes I look around me, I'm very blessed, I'm very blessed, I'm very blessed. It's in our weaknesses though, our failings, our foibles. That's where we really have to rely on God. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Maybe I'll preach on that. I'm moving on. Mark chapter 6. Our gospel text is from Mark chapter 6, verses 1 through 13. Mark chapter 6, verses 1 through 13. He left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. Oh, yeah, the whole hometown incident. The Gospels, I don't remember if there was a hometown incident in the Gospel of John, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke both, they all tell of times when Jesus went to his hometown. Of course, Mark's the oldest Gospel, so it could be that Luke and Matthew built off of what Mark had here, but look at this. On the Sabbath, verse 2, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, "Where did this man get all this? He's a local. What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands?" Remember just last week, the disciples had the experience in the boat with the waves and like, who then is this? Mm-hmm. What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. One of the things that I remember reading this not that long ago, but I can't remember where it was from. We were talking about the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which was what? Accounting. Oh yeah, it was in one of Jesus' sayings. Saying that a deed of God was actually a deed of Satan. That's the equivalent of blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. When you don't see the Spirit, when you account the activity of the Spirit as the activity of Satan. Taking offense at him, this is in that same realm. Let's go on. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honor except in their hometown and among their own kin and in their own house." Jesus here is quoting something. I don't know what he's quoting. I think he's quoting some common wisdom. We don't know necessarily what the source was on that, but it seems to be that kind of thing where, oh yeah, this is pragmatic. Or maybe this had never been said before. I don't know. Verse 5. I mean, let's face it though, the Old Testament is full of stories of prophets that didn't really get anything done in their own hometown. It was always go out there and do that to this and there and all of those places. Okay, verse 5. And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Then he went out among the villages teaching. He called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on 2 tunics, the bare minimum. He said to them, "Wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place." Don't keep shopping for the best offer. Accept what's given. Be content with that. Because what's most important isn't, well, how are the lodging? How are you liking your room? That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is getting the work done. Verse 11, if any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them. So they went out and proclaimed that all should repent. One of the things I want to say about this is shaking the dust off your feet. Some people say, that's like an ancient way of cursing. It doesn't have to be put in that kind of a milieu. I think that it's best thought of like this. When you're on mission, when you are tasked with something, it's easy for rejection. It's easy for us to take rejection with us, to take that with us. And as you know, if you're in sales or if you know somebody in sales, like when you're doing that kind of business, the people can't get, the sale begins when the customer says no. Have you ever heard that? Well, the idea here is that you can't let the negativity cling to you. Oh, dust on the feet. Dust on the feet. Do what? Shake off the dust. Yeah. Don't take that experience, that bad experience with you. That's not going to serve you in what your task is. Shake off the dust that is on your feet. I brought nothing here. I take nothing with me. It's a way of remaining clear and clean. Clear. Well, I meant to say clear, but clean too, right? But clear in the way of like, okay, I'm still focused on what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not getting clouded. I'm not like regurgitating that bad experience in my head, thinking, oh, wow, that's terrible what happened back there. That was awful. It's because you're no good on the next task, okay? This is what I believe the shaking off of the dust is about. Verse 12, so they went out and proclaimed that all should repent. It's the same message that Jesus had. So Jesus basically sent them out to do the same thing that he was doing. They cast out many demons, same thing that Jesus was doing, and anointed with oil many who were sick, same thing that Jesus was doing, and cured them, same thing that Jesus had been doing. Okay, this is the end of our lesson. Like I told you, I'm preaching, and there's a lot of good stuff here. In fact, I could even preach on the Psalm. Well, I guess we'll see, won't we? 4th of July. Until then, peace.